because they have taken the magic out of nature when they teach it. They've actually killed the traditional biology, zoology, those kinds of courses, in favor of the kinds of courses in microbiology and others in which you can create a new critter in a lab and then patent it and sell it. And you have more and more professors working on that, and then they end up on the boards of the companies that sell the patented critter created in the lab. And that's interesting because that critter was created with public money. It doesn't get talked about a lot. It's kind of, I've written about this before, it's replaced publish or perish with patent or perish. And the university gets a cut of the money, by the way. That's created a real problem, particularly in the research universities. They're teaching biology, teaching people the names of things. And Paul says that he'll have students come down to Scripps Institution of Oceanography to start to study marine biology who can't name a single marine animal or plant. It's the voice of the universities everywhere. Can you hear me? Am I still on? Okay, got it.
Don't walk there.
Yeah, I have to tell you a story. And I told this at the National Cathedral about something that happened this is a tangent, about 2 weeks earlier. I spoke at a Methodist church in Atlanta. It's one of the great churches of the civil rights movements. And I was up there, and as I was speaking, I noticed there was a really big storm coming in. I could see it from all the windows. I mean, it got really dark. And then lightning started coming down as I was speaking, and then the lights went off. And so when the lights went back on, I was hiding behind there and said, I'm sorry, whatever it is I said. And I retold that story at the National Cathedral. And then a storm came up. And no, that part didn't do that. What was I talking about? I'm sorry, what was I talking about? Oh, Scripps, okay, yeah. And he says he has them come down, they don't know us about it. And where do you start? He says, where do you start teaching people if taxonomy, if the names of things has been ignored? So that is true, but another thing is true too, that names aren't everything. Particularly for parents and young children, or even teachers even, and young children in particular. What counts most of all with young children, and even with us, is a sense of wonder. Sometimes I think it's better if parents don't know the names of everything when they take the kids outdoors. Because they will, if they're humble, they will experience that wonder and that sense of curiosity. Well, what's the name? Let's go look it up together. And what the kids remember is not the name of that, when they're small, is not the name of that particular plant or animal particularly. It's their parents' wonder. It's that moment they experience with their parents. Somehow, we've got to do both. We've got to have an education system that does teach people the names of things and where they belong and all that, but also teaches about the magic of things. It comes from a sense of wonder. That's a long answer. Being true in churches and lightning and God in them. You know.
Thank you. Usually I'm not one to ask a question so quickly, but I have two questions, but I'm going to try to keep it to one. So I have noticed that around here, many people who come to a table to talk about environmental issues are often white. Mm-hmm. And that may be a national phenomenon, I'm not sure. But I heard you a little while ago talk about how this topic of children and nature and making those connections can bring people to the table who might otherwise have differences, politics, religion. And I was just wondering your experiences with the efforts made to make the people at that kind of a table, or I should say out in the woods together, diverse. And so we all experience the benefits and strengths of a diverse group talking about these things.
This is absolutely true, that problem. Somebody once joked, and I won't name big environmental organization, the demographics of its membership are approximately that of the Ku Klux Klan. And you can see why I don't name them when I say that. What they meant by that was that it's white, middle class, and upper class people. And that is still true most places in environmentalism. And it's a problem. And the leaders in environmentalism know that. And they've been working on this, they've been trying. But I think that one of the things they haven't done is be humble enough to ask people that don't look like them, how do you connect to nature? In the nature principle, I write about an idea that I call natural cultural capacity. Not deficit, but capacity. Too often, people who look like me walk into a neighborhood where people who don't look like me live, and we're carrying our REI day pack, and I have one, it's right back there, and we walk in and we tell them how to connect to nature. When in fact, immigrant groups have ways to connect to nature. In Iran, there's a special day every year, once a year, it's called, I don't know exactly what it's called, but it's essentially Nature Day, where everybody goes out and families go out and have picnics. They go outside into nature. That'd be cool here, wouldn't it? African Americans have a long history. Diane Glave, G-L-A-V, has written a very interesting book about the history of environmentalism in conservation in African American communities. It goes far back in U.S. history, and it's based on something very different. For most of us, it's based on owning land. In the African American community, it goes far back to a time when they didn't own any land, and they were owned. And so it's a very different kind. There's overlap, but it's a different way of looking at environmentalism and conservation. Latino families, people who run, I'm sure the Parks District here has probably recognized this. Parks for a long time were losing population, losing visitors. They may still be doing that here, I doubt it. But the National Park Service, for about 15 years, and this is before Last Child, so I talked about this in Last Child, attendance was plummeting. So the park directors loved it when Latinos families showed up at the park, because they do nature differently than people who do look like me. They actually still have picnics. They have family reunions in the parks. They have group things that go on there. That's a different way. That's a capacity that's not every culture still has. So if we begin to find out these wonderful ways that different cultures do connect to nature, that's a place to start to increase the diversity, to work with them with respect and curiosity. It's not always easy, because sometimes it can verge on cultural appropriation or be interpreted that way. But somehow we've got to begin to share across cultures different ways that different cultures connect to nature.